So, good afternoon, everybody here in the room, and good morning and good evening to the people joining us online for today's event. My name is Johannes Trömer, and the many of you who know me for a long time and see me for the first time in a jacket, I can confirm it's me. I'm the Program Director for the Disability Inclusive Development Program, and together with a fantastic team, we have been managing the DIT Inclusive Futures program for the last 7.5 years now, so we are coming to an end. So this joint event with the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office is also one to celebrate what we have achieved, but also have a look into the future, what legacy we will leave behind. So the title for this event is Moving Disability Inclusion from the Margins into the Mainstream. And that was definitely one of the ideas of the DIT program, to kind of find out and test what works and what doesn't work on disability inclusion and taking up disability inclusive practices in the mainstream. We have achieved a lot in the last 7.5 years. For example, we have published more than 300 learning and evidence products of very different styles and forms. And I think we have, in a way, kind of managed to get a couple of mainstream actors, be it in programs, but also when it comes to local government, to take up disability inclusive practices. And we will hear a couple of examples on that today from the different speakers. So we have a kind of selection of speakers who will bring in their individual and specific experiences and thoughts. Now, yesterday there was a round table with Minister Elmore, and one of the things that were discussed quite intensively was kind of what does mainstreaming mean in practice, and how to bring disability inclusion into the mainstream, and what needed to be done to make mainstreaming effective. And I think there's also a lot of learning that we can offer, and I'm pretty sure during this event and later here in the building in the round tables we can have more in-depth discussions about it. Finally, there's no housekeeping rules. So if the fire alarm sets off, it's a real alarm, and we have to leave the building, right? With that, I want to introduce our first speaker, Tessa MacArthur. Tessa is the head of the Disability Inclusion team at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, and has worked intensively on equality over the last 5 years in different government offices, including the Cabinet Office and the Government Equalities Office. And prior to that, she worked in DFID as a senior governance advisor, including in Rwanda, Tanzania, and the Caribbean. Tessa, may I ask you for the opening remarks?
Hi, everyone. So I joined the team on International Day of Persons with Disabilities this time last year, and I was reflecting, wow, what a year it's been. From the Global Disability Summit, the Committee of State Parties, big changes in the development landscape, that so much has gone on over the past year. And I think underpinning all of that has been this amazing work going on through the Inclusive Futures Disability Inclusive Development Program. And I just want to thank Sightsavers for the amazing work you do organising these events. We've had so many webinars through this year, and it's always brilliant how fabulously you convene and organise everything. So I really appreciate that. And so thanks to everyone for bringing us here today and organising this. It's really great to see so many people we work with and partners here today. So welcome to this event. From the FCDO's perspective, we are really proud and delighted to be here today, because this program is absolutely crucial to building the learning and evidence and making the change to make disability inclusion the default across all our programs, all our policy themes. And our approach to development is rooted in addressing the climate and the nature crisis, promoting equality, human rights and poverty reduction, and driving and supporting sustainable growth. And fundamental to that is working in partnerships to support resilient systems that empower people and communities, ensuring that progress benefits everyone. Disability inclusion and rights isn't a separate strand, it's integral to this vision. And it means recognizing that people with disabilities face systemic barriers which must be addressed so they can fully participate in society and the economy, and development becomes fairer and more sustainable. When we launched this program, our ambition was clear: to transform the opportunities for people with disabilities in low and middle-income countries, and to build a global evidence sorely lacking in what really works. And it's really been about that, about changing systems, influencing policy, and ensuring that, most importantly, the voices of organizations of persons with disabilities and persons with disabilities are really at the core of these decision-making processes and structures. And I was really struck when I was speaking at the recent webinar on Kakuma and the amazing work that we've done on entrepreneurship in the refugee setting there, and just how important partnerships have been, and a really diverse set of partnerships. So international NGOs, local NGOs, research institutions, local governments, and organizations of persons with disabilities all coming together. And that came up, so profoundly, that this really has been such a consortium approach, such a breadth of stakeholders. And I think it's that's really helped to drive the progress and drive the innovation in this project. So, the headline figures are really striking. We've reached 15.6 million people, 3.4 million with disabilities, so exceeding the targets and what we could have hoped for. 170 learning products, including from our research arm. And then the Disability Help Desk, which is used so much in FCDO and has such an impact on helping us to really embed these lessons, whether it's in education, in our health programming. We've seen our Green Cities and Urban Infrastructure program taking real efforts to mainstream disability in that work, leading to commitments to the Global Disability Summit, for example. So that read across from learning into really big bits of FCDO work right out into international commitments has been a great thread from all the work that you've been doing as a consortium. And I think, we've seen real tangible impact. So I'm always struck telling seniors and ministers in FCDO about the work in Homa Bay and Kaduna, where we've seen the local governments committing to scale up on early childhood development centres as a result of the work we've done. It's that sort of sustainable impact that's really powerful and brilliant to see. And the same in Asia, in Bangladesh and Nepal. We've been working on the inclusive employment initiatives, and that's opened up formal and informal jobs for people with disabilities, with also really interesting impact on data. So schools are now collecting more consistently disability status, which we know is really important to making sure people are supported and seen. And so these aren't just isolated either. They are, we hope, and appear to be systemic shifts that will endure as a result of this work. I think also we've seen this shaping global thinking. I think some of you will know this year we agreed at the Global Disability Summit in Berlin that the UK would step up and co-chair the GLAD Global Action on Disability Network. And it's these sort of bodies that we want to use to ensure that this learning really gets out to all the partners, including emerging partners. We're excited that Qatar are going to host the 2028 one. It's a brilliant opportunity now to share this with people who are now getting more engaged in the space, looking at options. But there are all sorts of players and partners and collaborative opportunities to share and embed this learning from Inclusive Futures. So really, to open up, I just want to say again, that this event is really about taking stock of this learning, thinking about how we do use it to mainstream, and that it's not a tick box mainstreaming. You know, it's a really, it can really deliver, and we need to see how we can replicate and try and scale these brilliant innovations that we've seen through the program. So thanks very much for being part of the journey, for your collaboration, your passion on disability inclusion and rights, and really looking forward to hearing more from everyone today. Thanks.
Thanks, Tessa. We are starting with the first two speakers, which I'm happy to introduce. And these speakers are from the two co-leading organizations of the DIT program, that's Sightsavers and IDA, that together with a great consortium of 10 organizations made this program possible. Dom Haslam. Dom is my boss, and that's obviously his greatest achievement. But he's also the Deputy CEO of Sightsavers and the Director of Program Strategy and Policy. And the directorate kind of covers program strategy, technical leadership, policy, campaigns and communication, research and evidence, international partnerships, and institutional funding. So very few things. So happy to have you here, and I know Dom for quite some time, even from the time before I joined Sightsavers, and I know some of the things that are really important for him are to have a collaborative approach, to work in partnership, to move things together to make the world a better place, but also a strong belief in evidence-based decisions. That is why he and we were also keen to have research institutions on the side of the DIT program, like the PENDA program hosted by the London School for Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and the Institute of Development Studies. And so Dom is definitely, with this conviction, has been a main driver and mentor of the DIT program. Not less important was the second speaker that will join online. That's Jose Vieira. And he was meant to be here with us today, but his flight got cancelled. And so he had to reroute back to his home, Toronto, and is joining us online at early hours after only arriving in the middle of the night. Jose is the Chief Executive of the International Disability Alliance and has been the CEO of the World Blind Union before. And he is really a disability rights champion for many, many years, moving the needle on disability inclusion in many, many ways and many forums. It's really a pleasure to work with him because of his motivation, his energy, that's unbelievable. We just talked earlier, Jose, it seems you never go to bed, you are always available. But he, of course, also has a background in management and international development. So very happy to have the both of you with us today. And I'm changing places now. So we have decided at short notice that rather than giving speeches, I will think about some questions and they will try to answer them, because we thought it might be more interesting. And I try to cover a bit the kind of the life of DIT from the beginning days to today and what might be the legacy. So my first question to the both of you, Jose and Dom, would be, when the DIT program was kind of in the thinking phase and then set up, what was the main motivation and the ambition of the DIT program at that time? So what did you want to kind of bring to life with the DIT program?
Thanks, Johannes. Maybe I'll kick off, Jose, if that's okay with you. Gives you another 10 minutes to rest your eyes as well. Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, Johannes, and I think there's lots of things that I could say, but I think I think the thing to remember about the framing of the DIB program, most of all, is the sense of optimism that was around at the time when we talked about it. So coming off the back of a really successful campaign by the movement and allies to make the Sustainable Development Goals more inclusive than the NDGs had been, and I think, you know, much as we'd all have wanted there to have been more success, it was a pretty successful campaign overall. If you look at the targets, the indicators, the discussion around disability inclusion within the data conversations that happened and are still happening now. The kind of establishment coming out of that, of the GLAD network, which Tessa mentioned before, but also the Global Disability Summit structures, there was a real sense that we'd kind of made the case for development thinking to include disability as a key kind of part, a key part of the philosophy of inclusion, beyond other aspects that had been talked about before, gender being the most obvious but not the only one. So I think that kind of gave us a sense of, okay, so if we've made the case, what are we trying to show now? And I think there were two things that were really critical. The first was that there was a equal value of the resources that different organisations brought to the process of disability inclusion. So rather than it being a case of, okay, OPDs bring representation, that's great, but INGOs bring money and power and the ability to speak to power and so on, rather than a kind of lack of recognition of the value of those two resources, there was a kind of understanding that those two resources are equal. So without the representative nature, without the legitimacy that OPDs bring, INGOs have very limited authority to act in disability inclusion. Doesn't mean they can't do it, but the authority to do it, I think, is more limited. And likewise, without the resources that INGOs could bring, the global nature of the work, the experience in delivery and implementation, the resources on evidence generating and so on that INGOs could bring, there was a limit to what OPDs would be able to do in implementation. They could do a lot around advocacy and influencing, but implementation's a very different kettle of fish. So that kind of recognition of saying, okay, we've got both have legitimate roles to play here. Let's make sure those are equally recognised, not just in terms of what we say, but in terms of how we act. Hence the establishment of the governance structure shared between Site Savers and IDA, which is unique in my experience. So that was kind of one thing. And the other thing was, as has been talked about by Tessa and yourself already, that the value of evidence is equal to the value of getting stuff done. I'd use a different phrase if I was in a different company, but those two things are equally valuable. So the DID program needed to generate evidence in order to be valuable, not just generate outputs and things that we could talk about as the stuff that NGOs normally talk about. And that was particularly important because, let's be honest, it's still the case. It's less the case than it was before the DID program started, but disability inclusion is an area of development policy which has a really patchy evidence base. So Hannah Cooper could talk on this till the cows come home, so could Tom Shakespeare, but you know, you look in inclusive education, we can say a lot. You look outside of inclusive education, we can say very little. And in some areas we can say almost nothing at all about what works and what doesn't work. So there was a real understanding that had to be part of the process of the program. And I think a really interesting breakthrough moment for me when we were negotiating the new engineering contract 3 version in a basement in a hotel in South Kensington between the Site Savers and the then DFID team, was when we agreed that there was an equal value in terms of compensation, financial compensation to evidence of what didn't work as to evidence of what did work. And that sounds like a really small thing. It's a massive thing because it meant that we could do things that we wouldn't have done otherwise and take risks that there's no way we could have taken otherwise because we would have been financially liable. So to go back to the point of earlier, one of the things that we brought was we would pay if there was financial liability, not IDA. So that was really important for me to be able to take back to the organisation. So I think those two things are really key, but like I said, I could say a lot more, but I want to leave space for Jose as well.
Jose, please come in.
Thank you, Johannes, and thank you, Dominic, for your words. First of all, I really regret not being able to join you all in person. For me, for IDA, this event, as any other event, it's a pleasure to be part of, and it's a great opportunity to come together. But I really regret not being in person today because this event is no doubt one of the most important events in the month of December this year, because it's an event that more than reflecting what we have achieved, must outline what we are going to do next, and who we want to be next, and how we want to do things next. So to answer to your question, Johannes, there are for sure many things that can be said, but I would really like to focus on a couple of them, especially because from day one we understood that DEED was the first opportunity that we collectively had to show that what we advocate for is possible. We all know that human rights and disability inclusion historically has been more on the side of advocacy and fighting for what we believe is right. But the DEED program was kind of the tool to show to the world that what we asked for, and for many years, was possible if certain preconditions were in place. And this is maybe the second part of the answer that I want to focus. What were those preconditions that we quickly managed to identify and, even more importantly, collectively agreed on? First of all is where we wanted to put organization of persons with disabilities. And we have a couple of choices. Then the choice of continuing just perceiving and engaging OPDs as a group of advocates or representative leaders, or actually consider OPDs the partners of choice and the organizations that, especially at the national level, could leverage the potential of global instruments and transform them into real action to improve the life of persons with disabilities. And no doubt from day one, the choice chosen was the second one, to make OPDs the organization that can drive the change we all wanted and needed. The second precondition that actually in the end became no doubt one of the greatest success of the ID was the sense of partnership, the sense that together is always better. That of course persons with disabilities organizations could and should lead and be in the center, but that if we want to advance the agenda, we couldn't do it alone. So the idea of a consortium co-led by IDA and Site Savers, but also with a group of meaningful, absolutely supportive partners, was what allowed the ID to be a success. So the concept of partnership was another non-negotiable condition that after the life cycle of this project, we are even more convinced that it was the right decision. The third and maybe most important one, because talking about inclusion, advocating for the right of persons with disabilities, this is all good and nice. But if there is no money behind, it remains in the field of good wishes and good political will. So DID really, and not only for the overall investment that FCDO clearly decided to put forward when we started to do, but the way it was distributed, the way that it was executed, the way that it reached out persons with disabilities at the national level, and the way that those investments created return was, again, another condition, another precondition for the success that we are acknowledging today. Not only that without money, what we ask for is not possible, but I would go one step further and clearly say that resources should be properly allocated for research and evidence-based work, properly allocated between global and national work, but also properly allocated to create sustainability. And clearly what we are seeing after the ID is that there is more sustainability in disability inclusion. This sustainability allows us to think bigger, to think what is next, to bring new partners. But without this investment, we would be joining today this event but reflecting only on the nice advocacy goals that we could have achieved. Today we are celebrating sustainability that must continue and must be backed up by more resources, learning from the ID and seeing how we can expand the work.
Thank you, Jose, and thank you, Tom. Basically, you have already answered my second question, which is good time-wise. Just saying three things that stay with me. One is OPDs are partners of choice, and I think that really became a DNA of the DIT program, and we've worked with more than 200 OPDs across the 5 countries in our work. On the partnership model, I think we managed the global governance situation where we have either as an OPD and Sightsavers, as NGO, as a co-lead was replicated across countries and across our projects. And that was really instrumental in kind of making sure we are not doing projects for persons with disabilities, but they were on the table from the design to implementation. They took active role, they took leadership in elements of the projects. They were involved in monitoring, research and learning. And I think we also have all learned quite a lot on how to make that happen and to not stop by just talking to OPDs at the beginning of the program and then not talking to them anymore. And there's many more achievements that we don't have the time to cover now. So I will probably directly come to the last question for the two of you, and it's what happens with the legacy of the DIT program, so the learning products, the evidence that is generated, all the learning on what works and what doesn't work, and that's available, that's online. Some of it will still become available with evaluations from the Panda program being published over the next year. But what do we need to do to make this legacy a lasting one and really kind of support sustainable change? And if you would have a message to the ministers in charge of international development and on disability rights, what would be your message?
Am I bearing the audience in mind here? Do you want to go to Jose first?
Yeah, Jose, maybe you start.
Sure, I can start. Short messages are always better. So my very simple and short message, DID is clearly the mark, the bar that we need to build on in the future. Anything below DID is wrong. Anything below DID and what DID has learned and it has shown us in terms of evidence generation, in terms of funding, in terms of political commitment, in terms of collective action, in terms of partnerships, in terms of reaching the farthest behind, in terms of working at the national level. Anything that in the future that is below our ambitions within DID is wrong. We'll basically push the disability community back to where we were 20 years ago. And I fully acknowledge that the current context for the world, and particularly for the disability community, is not as good as we thought it was going to be after 20 years of CRPD. And that is for sure a reflection that we have to all make. What we did wrong and what we did right, maybe not to be as strong as we should have been after 20 years of CRPD. But in practical terms, DID is the landmark for the future. Everything that comes next has to be above what the DID created. Anything below will be wrong. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jose. Thanks, Jose. That's I couldn't agree more with everything you've said. I mean, look, you know, up until January this year, I think the expectation was that we would be sitting here having this kind of event and talking about the daughter of DID 2, whatever you want to talk about. That's the reality. Everybody knows that in the room. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know already. And, you know, from my point of view, we've talked about a lot of the different partnerships. It's really important to recognise the partnership between FCDO and all the stakeholders that we've talked about, because I've been around in the development sector for a long time, and the nature of the partnership that we've had with FCDO takes me right back to the 1990s and how it used to be. And although there's lots of ways in which things have progressed, there are other ways in which they have not, and that's one area in which it has not. So that genuine agreement on the policy objectives of the programme, the flexibility around the working practices and arrangements, the agreement that we had shared interests at heart as the donor and the recipient, to use the language that's used now but wasn't used then either. That's been a fundamental part of the process. I mean, I think we need to recognise that. So while I am going to say that it is incredibly disappointing that we're not talking about that daughter of DID or DID2, obviously, no one in this room is responsible for that. There are decisions that had to be made. I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but I think it's a deeply difficult decision to come to terms with. We all have to do that, because it's no good sitting here and saying, well, that's it then. So what we were planning on doing, we can't do, so we're just going to bury our heads in the sand, go and cry about it, or get angry. None of those things are going to be valuable. So for me, I think, as Jose said, it's about asking what the really important questions are. And I think it's also acknowledging some things that haven't been answered. So I don't think we've answered the question of what should the role of OPDs in implementation of policy be. I'm not sure if that was ever really a target for us to achieve, but if it was, we haven't. But what I think we have done is shown what the role could be and how it can work in a variety of different ways. And I think that's really important, and something I hope all of the organisations that have been involved in DID continue to develop learning and expertise and experience in, because I think it's really important. I use the phrase chucking rocks, and I'm not ashamed of saying I think the disability movement pre-2015 was really good at chucking rocks, pointing out where things weren't working, pointing out how they needed to be better, but not getting involved in the solutions. I'm not distributing any blame for that, it's just a reality. Where I think we are now is in a space where there is a lot more evidence and experience of how OPDs can be involved in building and construction and generating and developing, and as well as the holding to account as a critical part of that role. And I think that's a really important achievement of DID to note. The last thing I'm going to say, because we haven't really talked about it very much, is the nature of the consortium. So we talk a lot about the Site Savers and IDA partnership. I've just talked about FCDO. I think the fact that this room is busy and we're not talking about the daughter of DID, the fact that when we have learning seminars, we get a really wide range of people engaged from a number of the different NGO partners, the fact that most of the partners who started off the journey are still with us, even though much of the money to some of them has stopped being distributed, so there's fewer orders that I sign every month to sign off money going to DID partners now than there was at the beginning. I think it's a real testament to how it's worked as a partnership, and I really hope that it generates some ongoing work in country and in policy and advocacy practice between NGOs that have been involved in the DID consortium for time to come. Because yes, we might not be talking about DID2 funded by FCDO, but there is money out there. That money hasn't disappeared, it's still there. It might be in the hands of different people and being spent on different things, but if we could get Bill Gates to switch on to disability inclusion, there'd be more money available for disability inclusion than there's ever been before. So, that kind of challenge to ourselves doesn't stop, but I very much hope we'll be facing that challenge as a group, because I think we've shown that we can work together. We're quite good at competing each other, we've known that for decades, but we can actually work together pretty effectively as well. And I think that's been a real achievement, so thank you to all of you and your organisations for the role you've played in that. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Don, thank you, Jose, and thank you all partners, people in the room, people online, partners on global level, but also in the countries. I will change and you will change, Don. And it was also a kind of perfect talking into the next program point. So we have invited representatives from 3 OPDs to talk about their experience in Inclusive Futures. And as you know, visa issues are not easy these days, so we have pre-recorded a kind of sort of round table with them, and I'm just briefly going to introduce them before we see the video. So the three OPD leaders are Sanu Kimbacha, who is project manager at the National Federation of the Deaf in Nepal. It's Rizika Toyin Muhammad, Chief Executive of Women with Disabilities Self-Reliance Foundation in Nigeria. And it's Esther Makamori, who is Head of Programs at United Disabled Peoples of Kenya. And I think with that we can start the video.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Sanu, working from Nepal, working with the National Federation of Deaf Nepal. With the Inclusive Future project, actually, we push the government from having OPDs engaged in this process. So we engage multiple OPDs in Nepal who advocate very strongly for having this embedded in the education management information system. In the beginning, the government started with some kind of like pilot with 345 municipalities so far in last 2 years. And now they are targeting to reach to 555 municipalities out of 753 municipalities. So they are taking this phase-out approach as well. And as OPDs, we are working together with the government. We work together on first thing is about advocacy, about making people understand about this requirement and its implementation. And second thing is about working together to train people, particularly teachers and education authorities, so that it is implemented in the ground level. So I think that's how we started working in the project. That's given this kind of like I would say good result as the government started the new system, IMIS system, and they incorporated disability data module where they have the WGCFM for the identification, followed by a kind of like referral pathways as well. So linking it with the assistive device and other services. So I think this in this whole journey actually as an OPD, and we work very closely with the government and closely to support in the system itself. It's not only about demanding, and for us, it's also about supporting about how to incorporate that in the system, how to implement that as well.
That's incredible to hear a bit more about that. It's such a big achievement of the programme. I hope you rightly feel proud about the legacy of Inclusive Futures there. And just to kind of drill down a little bit more, could you tell me, how did Inclusive Futures invest in and support OPDs to hold the government accountable and achieve this big win?
I think Inclusive Future is one of the projects that embedded OPD engagement from the very beginning. That's something other projects many often fail, because it's OPD engagement comes like afterthoughts. On the part of OPD engagement is about having OPDs in the local level to understand the project, WGCFM, and then enhance the capacity. So I think Inclusive Future started working from the capacity building to engage them in their discussion, like having a place where they can talk with the government about the requirement, about their expertise, how they can use them. So I think this is how Inclusive Future has embedded OPD engagement from the beginning. That's have given the result, I would say.
Thank you, Sanu. That's really clear and really important message. So thank you for making that point so well. A key success for Inclusive Futures in Nigeria has been influencing Kaduna State Government to introduce a £15.8 million plan to improve sexual and reproductive health rights for 800,000 women and girls with disabilities, and that Kaduna State Ministry of Health has committed to funding 40% of this. Can you tell us about the role OPDs played in advocating for and achieving this win?
My name is Rizika Toyin Muhammad, Executive Director, Women with Disabilities Self-Reliance Foundation. What we did is, with the support of Site Saver training, the OPD, building their capacity to lead, we led the process, because making government accountable, showcasing persons with disability in all aspects of programming involving governments gives more confidence in government to understand that there is ability in disability, and also give the strength to OPD to know their right and also the capacity to engage government when it comes to accountability. So with the first step is that having that state inclusive family planning policy, which is a commitment by the Kaduna State that there is a need to have a sexual reproductive health right policy for women and girls with disability, which it is costed. We have a costed, Kaduna State costed implementation plan, which shows the government commitment. So there is a real progress. And in the whole Nigeria, Kaduna State is the only state having that. Without inclusive future support, we will not be able to have the capacity to make government accountable through continuous capacity building. All this advocacy is through the support of the inclusive futures. For example, I can give an example when site savers are invited for meetings. Site saver inclusive futures, under these inclusive futures, OPD represents site saver at the partners meeting, showing them that the OPD have the power, the capacity to lead.
Thank you, Resikat. Thank you, Sanu. And if it's okay, it'd be brilliant to hear from you, Esther, now as well. So in Kenya, OPD-led advocacy led to local governments committing £1.8 million to develop more than 250 inclusive early childhood development centres and long-term commitments from many county governments to continue supporting micro entrepreneurs with disabilities. What are the benefits of empowering OPDs to influence local systems?
So the first thing, of course, is the legitimacy. Involving OPDs brings legitimacy to the issues that, programs are addressing, because then OPDs are bringing in the voices of persons with disabilities. So by working with organizations of persons with disabilities and empowering them to be at the fore of our implementation of program implementation, then it means that, the advocacy issues, the programs, the interventions are rights-based and aligned to the real needs of persons with disabilities. And then as well, the local OPDs understand the context. They know what are the most urgent issues. They understand what decision-making structures, are both supporters, what are hindrances to furthering inclusion. And therefore, by having OPDs at the fore, then we're able to tackle the root causes of the issues. And for instance, what we were able to achieve through inclusive futures, early childhood development education is a devolved function in Kenya. It's not a function of the national government. And in the governance of early childhood development education, there is a place for public participation, and the public including persons with disabilities. So then organizations of persons with disabilities are able to map these areas where they can intervene through, and then, be able to target those through advocacy. And one of the main things is the county integrated development plans, where the counties make plans for the 5 years. County integrated development plans make 5-year development plans for counties, and those 5-year plans identify priorities, including in education. And so the OPDs were able to make sure that these budgets for having inclusive early childhood development education are incorporated within those plans. And then the other thing is then now making sure that that happens after it's been documented in the development plan. And OPDs are able to follow through because they are within those counties. They keep engaging with the county government, so they're able to follow up through the annual development plans and annual budgets, and make sure that these commitments, these priorities are now translated into actual action. Another thing, it's the mobilization of the community, because what worked with, for instance, the FCDO project is the OPDs were leading awareness creation and advocacy with both families, the community, working on bringing out the children with disabilities, making sure that they're being connected to schools. So, and similarly, on the micro-entrepreneurs program, the organizations of persons with disabilities are able to identify the micro-entrepreneurs within communities, connect them to the program, and then address the challenges that the micro-entrepreneurs face, including lack of inclusive markets, budgeting for economic empowerment grants for micro-entrepreneurs, and then they're able to follow through, hold governments to account and make sure that those commitments are being actualized.
Congratulations to you, Esther, and the rest of your organisation. What investment did UDPK need and get from Inclusive Futures to support local OPDs to influence local governments successfully?
So one thing, and I think this cuts across the Inclusive Futures programming, is the central, placing the role of OPDs at the center, and that included budgeting for that role of OPDs. Recognizing, the capacity needs, both in terms of technical support and financial support to carry out the advocacy and influencing work. So first, what Inclusive Futures did is to have a twin track approach, looking at what are the internal capacities that organizations of persons with disabilities need to have to be able to influence. Because, for instance, understanding development planning, budget processes, there are capacities that are required there. So the program invested in conducting capacity needs assessment for OPDs and then going on to build those capacities. And the program supported that fully. On the side of advocacy, supporting OPD-led advocacy planning and engagement in policies and with county governments, and also similarly what was happening at the county government also happening at the national level. So then you have these OPDs whose advocacy capacities have been built. Their internal capacity in terms of, governance, how do they do the advocacy planning, how do they execute their mandates, how do they represent the diversity of voices of persons with disabilities within their constituents. And then on the other side, how do you go and how do you hold roundtable engagements with county governments? You develop a memo, the program supports you to be able to present this memo, and then the actual follow-up. So the kind of investments that Inclusive Futures made in terms of the structured capacity development and also supporting the advocacy role of OPDs, that has created such a change. And also, and not just in terms of the impact, because we've seen actualization of county disability acts, having county disability committees coming into place. We've seen organizations of persons with disabilities being strengthened to the point of formalization, including registration and all that. And then also at national level, county level OPDs being able to contribute to national level policy making, the National Persons with Disabilities Policy and Act. The program was able to support that participation of county level OPDs, and then also supporting the work that at national level UDPK does in terms of engaging with government, including in national level OPD participation structures.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you, Esther. It's really, really interesting to get that breakdown and hear how it actually worked. And I just wanted to say another thank you for your valuable time and your insights today.
Find out more at inclusivefutures.org.
Yes, thanks. And we have heard a lot from the three OPD representatives now about how they engaged with local government. And so I'm really happy that we now have a representative from Homer Bay County government with us. So Joseph Goga is the Director of Early Childhood Development and Education at Homer Bay County Government. Working at the Sub-County Director of Early Childhood Education from 2013 to 2022, Joseph assumed his current position in 2023. As County Director, he provides strategic leadership, drives policy implementation, and fosters partnerships that enhance the quality and reach of early childhood education across the county. So very happy to have you here, Joseph, online. And I kindly ask you to tell us a bit more about how you worked in the county government from the Early Childhood Development Education Directorate with Inclusive Futures and the OPDs, and what are the main successes you see, and how did it happen that the county government really took up the disability inclusion at early childhood development education so seriously? Joseph, the floor is yours.
Thank you. In Kenya, I can greet you as good evening. I don't know whether you're getting me. Hello? Hello?
Joseph, we can hear you. If you please just unmute your mic.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me, Joseph?
You can now hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please carry on. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Joseph Goga, the director in charge of early years education in Homa Bay County. Homa Bay County is a county with 896 ECD centers. That is the public ECD centers, and 468 private ECD centers, with a total population of 90,396 ECD children. The site saver is a critical partner for us in the county and has done a lot that need to be even appreciated seriously. I just want to enumerate some of the achievements that we have done, because we have really been having a good cordial relationship with the site saver since their entry in Homa Bay County. One of the things that they have really embarked on is that they looked at the county government structures and decided to capacity build or train the leadership, from the top leadership, the county executive committee member, to the implementer, which is the ECD teacher. And the structure comes from start from the county executive committee member to the chief officer, director, sub-county director, ward supervisors, ECD teachers. They have even further gone to train teachers, head teachers from the schools that have domiciled ECD centers. They have also trained 81 head teachers. And that capacity has really done a lot in equipping educators and the implementers with skills, knowledge, and resources needed to meet all the learners' diverse needs. That is one of the things that they have really done. Another thing that site savers has done in Homa Bay is creating awareness to parents in relation to inclusive education. And I want to say that that one has been done in all public schools that have been selected, the 81 public schools, and to the community that are surrounding those schools. And they have even gone as far as organizing fun days, sporting activities as a form of sensitization. And this one has really increased enrollment, better teacher skills, positive community attitude towards disability, and sustainable inclusive practice. In fact, we are seeing a lot of children who are in the village coming to school and enjoying learning in our ECD centers. Another important work that they have also really done and supported the county government is the provision of teaching and learning materials, the essential teaching and learning materials that they have provided and supplied in 81 ECD centers. And these learning and teaching materials have really also influenced the county government. We have also gone as far as purchasing other more learning and essential learning materials, which are very inclusive. And this one has improved academic outcomes for our ECD children, boosts learners' confidence and self-esteem. And it has also enhances engagement through diverse formats, meaning teachers can use a visual aids, audio, tactile, to impart the skills and the knowledge that they wanted the children to develop. It has also brought about the development of essential skills, such as how to take care of learners with disability. Another important item that the site saver has also done with the county government is that through the teachers and the government officials, the county government officials with the site saver, they have developed play-based toolkit. A play-based toolkit is like a syllabus for inclusive education for ECD children in Homa Bay County. And this one has really boosted in engagement with learners and with teachers, supporting diverse learning needs, developing social and emotional and cognitive skills of our young children, and even teachers who are also not aware in terms of handling children with disability, or in terms of taking care of children with disability. Another important thing is that we really taken care of, the site savers have really supported the county government of Homa Bay is in support, giving resources and financing of inclusive ECD policy. In fact, many counties in Kenya have never developed ECD policy, but the county government of Homa Bay, through the programs that the site saver have been doing, we have come up with an ECD, inclusive ECD policy, which is talking so much and emphasizing issues of disability. One of them, this policy is really going to help or strengthen the government system. That means it is going to promote better financing quality and efficient management of ECD services through integrated frameworks that have been laid in that policy. It will also emphasize on early interventions, identify children with special needs, and maximizing their potentials. The policy is also talking about improving school teachers' readiness, strengthening foundational literacy, numeracy, and overall skills, and for a smoother transition from ECD to elementary schools, that is the primary, and other issues that are related to the policy. And that one is also going to help our teachers in terms of even improving training and equipping them with inclusive evidence-based strategies. So that policy is very important for us, and really we were yearning to get it. And through the site savers, they have really supported it. It has been taken to the cabinet, and it is only waiting to be passed by the assembly, and it becomes an instrument that is going to be used in Homa Bay. By doing that, the county government is really passionate about what the site savers are doing, and through that experience, they are also retrofitting their infrastructure to support inclusive education. For instance, in the last year's financial budget, they constructed 243 ECD centers, which are adaptable to children with disability. Another this financial year, the 2025-2026, they have allocated finance to do 360 ECD centers in the whole county. And the whole country, we have 40 wards. So 9 ECD centers are going to be done in every ward. And these ECD centers are going to be adaptable for children with disability. In that, they have also purchased ECD learning materials. They have also purchased ECD learning materials in last year's budget, which is also very important for improving the academic outcomes. And however, we are they have been doing that, but still with the enrollment that I've indicated and the number of ECD centers that we are having, we are still having some inadequacy in terms of the learning and teaching material. But the government is very positive on improving teaching and learning material in the field. One thing that I would like to say is that the county government of Homa Bay have got a very cordial relationship and collaboration with the partners, more so with the site saver. And I hope that, God willing, many things are coming to make this program become sustainable. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joseph, for sharing what the Homa Bay County government is doing and the passion it puts behind disability inclusion. And when we visited Homa Bay County and met you and colleagues from other programs, we could really feel that passion and that commitment. And it's great to see also beyond even the programs in Inclusive Futures, how the county government with support from SENS, from Light for the World, from Site Savers and the Inclusive Futures Consortium committed also to take up disability inclusion as a cross-cutting issue across the county government. So thank you very much, Joseph. It's a great testimony of a great partnership. And with that, we are coming to the last speaker for this afternoon, and that's Annie Hans. Annie is the Disability Inclusion Development Coordinator for Humanity and Inclusion, and she oversees the HI programs or partnerships on education, livelihood, and health under Inclusive Futures. With more than 20 years of experience in the sector, which is hard to believe when looking at Annie. She brings a lot of technical expertise, but what I even appreciate more is kind of to see how much you link the technical and professional expertise with kind of really working with families, seeing what's the ground realities, what's the situation of families, the kids, the schools, and so on, and really a great link between policy and what's really happening in communities. Annie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Johannes. Good afternoon, good evening to those who are staying wherever you are. You just heard from the first speakers, we got to know like a very global understanding of some of the achievements from this program. We got to hear about the OPD perspective. We also got to hear about the government perspective. And I'd like to bring in a little bit about perspectives from the different partners who have been involved in this program. So in terms of achievements, I would like to say that one of the most significant achievements of this program has been on how it has delivered quality disability inclusive projects at scale. And across 6 countries in Asia and Africa, we've supported both horizontal scale-up, that's replicating proven models in newer areas, and we've also looked at how to vertically scale up, where we've embedded inclusive practices within government systems to increase the impact. And this is what you've just heard from the different speakers. And I would like to again go to an example of our horizontal scale-up from Kenya. Light for the World is the lead consortium partner for this project on livelihood in Kenya, together with UDPK, Humanity and Inclusion, and Sense International. We developed a disability inclusive entrepreneurship model that's built around 3 pillars. The first pillar is on individual support, where we provided tailored training, need-based assistance like assistive devices, reasonable accommodation. Pillar 2 is about connections, so making the connections for entrepreneurs to markets, to financing, to procurement opportunities. And pillar 3 was on system strengthening, where we worked with OPDs to engage in policy discussions, in accountability mechanisms, and economic planning. We also introduced innovations like the Disability Inclusive Facilitator, and this is a model that Light for the World has tested in other countries, and we try to incorporate it into this intervention. We looked at peer-to-peer support models, and the model that we tested in the pilot phase was then rolled out across 11 counties in Kenya. It included Homa Bay, Nairobi, Meru County, and also in the refugee context in Kakuma. And what's interesting is, and you might have read it in the reports, that the evidence shows that this model has worked across the counties. And why it's important to understand is the Kakuma refugee context is very different, say, from Nairobi or from Meru or from Homa Bay, where refugees with disabilities have to negotiate a very restricted legal and regulatory space. But the evidence shows that household finances of people with disabilities who participated increased by 30%. But scaling did not mean just copying and pasting. It required adaptation. And we know that refugees, so I'm just giving an example from Kakuma, from the refugee context, where refugees face challenges in getting business permits, in opening bank accounts, because they do not have a national ID. And procurement systems in the camps are very much influenced by humanitarian agencies, and this is very much unlike what you find in Homa Bay or in Nairobi, where you have access to government opportunities, you have access to government procurement opportunities. Even the OPDs, we heard from Esther about OPDs being engaged. In Kakuma, because there is no process of identifying a person with disability, there is very less chances of an OPD being recognized because you cannot, the disability is not recognized. So it's very difficult for an OPD to be registered in Kakuma. So giving all of this, we had to really adjust the model, adapt the model based on the context, based on the existing systems and stakeholders involved. Now let's move to Nepal, and you've heard from Sanu about some of the successes we've had in terms of data. This is a small example of vertical scale-up where we've tried to integrate disability inclusion into the national government system. So in Nepal, Humanity Inclusion is the consortium lead for this inclusive education program with Sense International, Autism Care Chitwan Society and OPD, the National Federation of the Deaf Nepal, which is an OPD. We piloted an inclusive education model in 46 schools in one municipality. 3 years later, we're now working with 145 schools across 2 municipalities. And I'll you heard from the OPD perspective about the data, and I'll just go into that aspect on how we worked with school-level data on disability. So under the Inclusive Futures program, we tested the use of the Washington Group questions in 46 pilot schools. What we did was we trained the enumerators, we strengthened the back-end systems, we developed the training material, we supported data collection and analysis. Oftentimes, data is collected on Washington Group questions, but then there is no analysis and there is no follow-up of that. Once we had this robust system to screen, record, and analyze data of children with disabilities, we rolled it across 145 schools in the project area. And most importantly, with the buy-in of the school authorities and the municipal authorities. But most importantly was we engaged the Center of Education and Human Resource Development, and this is the government nodal agency for education. So today, every school in the project area routinely identifies children with disabilities, uses this data to ensure budget allocation for children with disabilities as well as for school improvement plans. And the Center of Education for Human Resource and Development has formally incorporated the WG questions into the National Education Management Information System. And what this really means is that children with disabilities will now schools will now routinely collect disability disaggregated data across schools in Nepal. But there is also a problem here. When we have a control school which is adjacent to our operational school, when we look at the data from our recently concluded evaluation, it shows us that while the school is mandated to collect data, the data is sometimes incomplete, and then the analysis is also a little weak, which shows that even if schools right now can and will do data collection, but they do not have the required, not the necessary skills probably to take it forward. So there are certain gaps that are still there even now. But what, and maybe finally I would like to say is that, like, these examples show that lasting change in disability inclusion can happen at scale. And we've all spoken about it more than once. When we work together, when evidence is shared and adapted based on our learning, when OPDs are equal partners, when we work with systems, existing systems, when we have longer project cycles with multi-year funding, this helps us build rather than just deliver on projects. And finally, to conclude, scaling disability inclusion is not just about numbers, it's about ensuring quality, ownership, and sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annie, for sharing your insights. Great contributions. Now I have to do something what I really hate. I have to skip the Q&A questions because our translators would not be available for another 20 minutes. And that also shows you how lousy I am as your moderator today. But we will keep the chat for the online participants open, so you can put your questions into the chat, and we will try to answer them then after the meeting in the next couple of days. For all others who are staying here in the room, there's now the chance to still kind of get to your questions when we join on different roundtables, where we want to really go more in depth into an interaction and a real exchange of learning and questions that all of us may have in what's next to make disability inclusion sustainable and put it on to scale, as you said, Annie. For that round tables, we have to change the room, which is the next challenge, because I know the moment you change a room, people get stranded on the side of water and coffee and so on. So we really kind of ask you to rush to the other room, and people will point you where it is. It's not very far. And as I have imagined already, I forgot the name of the room, but you will be guided to it. And then we will explain the roundtable setup. But now to conclude this part of the session, I'm inviting Judith Herbertson for some closing remarks. So Judith is the head of the Girls' Education Department at FCDO. She has held previous roles in embassies and high commissions overseas in Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Afghanistan, Sudan, and Pakistan, so very diverse countries, as well as in the UK. She has worked in DFID and now FCDO since 2003, and prior to that you were working for 17 years as a teacher, I was told. So may I ask you for your closing remarks?
Ooh, challenging. Good afternoon. You are really good listeners. I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude for your dedication. What's going to work here? No, let's go back. Energy and unwavering commitment to creating this world we've heard about, where everyone, regardless of ability, has the opportunity to thrive. It's been a real privilege to be here, a demonstration of the collective power of hope and determination. We've heard a wonderful range of voices sharing their insights and experiences, achievements that were really only possible due to the strong teamwork at all levels. International organisations leading the way, organisations of persons with disabilities connecting us through to the community, supportive governments, and most importantly, the project participants. From children with disabilities eager to learn, to teachers, parents, and communities challenging stigma, and women and girls with disabilities standing up for their rights. Collaboration has made all the difference. And FCDO's Disability Inclusive Development Programme has broken new ground. We've heard how it's supported thousands with disabilities to access education, livelihoods, and healthcare. how it built partnerships, challenged perceptions, and drove a global conversation on inclusion. And we all know these achievements are not about statistics, they're about the stories of individual lives changed for the better, one by one. And I want us to think a little bit about what remains after the projects. We haven't always been that great at legacy and sustainability, but one of the enduring legacies here is the wealth of knowledge we leave behind. The learning products available, they stand as a comprehensive resource for practitioners, policymakers, and advocates. And they capture the lessons, innovations, and challenges faced with practical guidance to make future programs more inclusive. And they're our invitation to the world, if you will, to learn, adapt, and build on our experience. I would also like to recognise the pivotal contribution of Social Development Direct's Disability Help Desk. Through their rigorous evidence gathering and learning, it produced accessible and actionable guidance to inform policy and practice. And the evidence has not only illuminated gaps, but highlighted what works to make systems genuinely inclusive. Knowledge freely available, helping others to avoid our missteps and to amplify our successes a little bit. But the impact of the programme goes far beyond the immediate beneficiaries. Governments globally, as we've heard, have drawn on our approach to strengthen policies and services, and above all systems, to make sure no one is left behind. Ministries have revised their strategies, schools have adapted classrooms, and health systems have become more welcoming. And that ripple effect of advocacy and evidence is visible in the growing number of countries now embracing disability inclusion. And by sharing our resources and experience, I hope that we've encouraged a broader shift towards inclusive development. More organisations embedding inclusion in their frameworks, measuring progress, and holding themselves and us accountable. And this is creating, lasting change, not just for today, but for generations to come.